what really needs to change, and how do we think we can do that, right? So in any kind of societal change, which is really what we are talking about when we are looking at redefining retirement or reimagining what retirement could look like, the government and society are critical. The government is critical because they can use their power of regulation or legislation to make change, right? I don't know how many of you are following the news in France, but the French government has passed through legislation where they've actually compulsorily increased the age of retirement. Now, this automatically means people have to work longer before they're entitled to state pension and so on and so forth. The governments in the UK and in the US are actively encouraging older workers to come back into the workforce. Also, as society, we need to look at how that might impact how we view one another in the context of this society. You know, we don't need to have a special place for the so-called older people anymore. You know, we are all equal. And that's how society should move towards, by treating everybody as an equal. Organizations clearly need to change. I've referred to the fact that inclusion lies at the heart of diversity. And in order for diversity to work successfully, organizations need to be able to include the more mature workforce. In order to do that, of course, it is also up to us to show them that having that diversity that a more mature workforce brings is going to be beneficial to the financial performance. So that is also a developing area. But last and not least, it's us who needs to change. Each of us needs to change, and we need to look at this whole business of retirement and you know, the linear life that I spoke about earlier. We need to look at it differently. How do we do that? I think, you know what? So in fact, I was meant to speak about this in March, but for unavoidable reasons, we had to postpone it. When I did plan for the March talk, this was meant to be for 15 people. And we had taken a poll of what were the main challenges that they faced. Now, clearly, there was a challenge of acceptance. There was a challenge of relevance of knowledge, of transitioning, of uncertainty, a lot of the things that some of you have brought up in the chat box, right? Financial was a big one. But equally a big one was this need to share what we know, but people not being willing to listen to us. So that actually is quite an unnerving challenge to have. Here we are thinking that, you know, we've spent 30 or 40 years in the corporate world or in any other world, in the teaching world that you've come from, and we are here to give back. But nobody wants to take back anything from us. You know, and how can that be? So I think the first thing that all of us need is a very serious dose of humility. You know, I hear the phrase giving back quite a lot. Personally, I don't like it because to me, it smacks a little bit of being patronizing. You know, giving back is not an entitlement. Before we decide to give back, we need to prove that we are actually worthy of giving back. And who's going to judge that? It's the people who are going to receive what we're going to say. If they don't think you're worthy of giving back, you ain't giving back to anybody. I can tell you that, right? Whatever you think of your own lives. So humility, a serious dose of humility is required in all of us. Transactionalism doesn't normally work. And what I mean by that is, yes, if you're looking for that next project or the next employment opportunity or whatever, that's fine. And that could work to a certain extent. But in order to create a more sustainable stream of activity, maybe we need to think a little bit deeper than just looking out for the next project, which will keep us busy for the next 6 months or whatever it is, right? Which really brings me to this Japanese concept of ikigai. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but I will go through it anyway. It means the reason to live or your raison d'etre. Obviously, these nice, pretty diagrams are nice to look at, but all of us should be aware, and I'm sure are aware, that life is not always so pretty, right? It's great if you can find your sweet spot, which is the intersection of all these four circles, but it's not a big tragedy if you can't. So don't stress yourselves over ikigai by not being able to find your ikigai, right? I mean, just all that's required is an ability to introspect a little more deeply. You have an opportunity here to plot your future a little bit more carefully than perhaps you did when you started off. I don't know about you, but I suspect the story is not dissimilar to a lot of you. As it happens, or numeracy came fairly easily to me as a child, right? I had no particularly great love for maths, but I just happened to be good at it. And before I knew what the hell was going on, I was a chartered accountant at the other end of the pipe. So whilst not regretting that, I think we should be cognizant and acknowledge the fact that maybe we have an opportunity to plan our future a little bit more carefully now. And that requires a lot of internal work to try and understand who we are a little bit better in order to understand what kind of activity that we could engage in, which could be sustained, which could be motivational, and allow us to do what we want to do or what we like doing. Okay? And finally, I mean, I don't like cliches, but I think it's really up to each of us to determine what a growth mindset means. It's a term that is used often, and I mean, you can read the stuff that's written on the diagram, but I think we need to determine what that means for each of us. And life is generally better if we can. Stopping where you are right now is not going to help you move forward too much. So you need to do something different. And what that is something that, with a bit of humility, with a bit of introspection, and with a bit of a mindset shift is something that each of us can do better, perhaps. So this is where I'd like to pause, Shitanshu, if that's okay with you, and try and get some thoughts from the audience, from all of you, on your reflections on any concerns or questions that you have. We can talk about it for a little bit, but what we could also do a little bit later is to break you up into a few groups and reflect on certain things, which I will structure for you when we are ready to do that. So let me pause for now and get some thoughts from each of you.
I agree with you that Ikigai helps in creating a new identity post-retirement. And one of the important things in establishing what you want to do is the passion, identifying your passion and finding out whether that passion, whatever you want to serve, using that passion, does the society need it? If that happens, definitely there is a match and you can look at creating a new identity.
For sure. My only caution or caveat is that don't stress yourself out if you can't find a passion straight away. Yes. I mean, take it easy on yourself, but at least use the structure of this to kind of think about yourself, to introspect, and to find out what you want to do going forward.
Basav, there's a question in the chat by Sunita Sinha. What is the change in mindset that will help adapt better, and how to do it?
I wish I could give you an answer, Sunita. I think, well, the fundamental issue is to think about how you can challenge yourself to do things differently. If you can get away with doing the same thing, well and good luck to you. But there was a comment. In fact, there was a comment on the earlier point. There was an earlier comment in the chat box from Jatin, who very rightly says that this whole thing about DEI, etc., is more relevant today in Europe than in India because of various reasons. The reality is that there is a lot of pressure in general, especially in the corporate world, to transition people out in their 50s. Now, that is not going to change next week. If you are going to remain relevant, if you are going to work out what you need to do, I think you've got to start challenging, rather than expect the corporate world to change, you need to start challenging yourself to try and understand what you need to change in order to carve out a life. How you do it, there are multiple ways to do it. You can read, you can find out what's going on, you can talk to people, you can talk to leaders, you can talk to Neeraj and his team in Wisdom Circle. There are many ways to do it, but getting the knowledge is one thing. Challenging yourself to try and adapt is quite another. And that's where most of the effort lies, actually. So sorry, I couldn't be more specific than that, Sunita.
If I may add, sir, to Sunita's question, may I, sir?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. Since most of us, when we, like you said, sir, that, when we get into a different profession after retirement, we are going to work with a younger workforce, and we need to prove ourselves that we're worthy of that position. So one slight, mindset change, which I think can help us, is that one is that, you must realize that you can't choose your juniors, you can't choose your seniors. That is given to you. Number two, you remember one more thing, that if you get it, you enjoy it. If you don't get it, don't miss it. This two simple formula, if you follow, I think you can, get into a better position.
Yeah. True. I agree. Each to their own also, right? If you can reach a stage where, if you don't get it, you don't miss it, that's great. Not everybody can, but they still have to work out what they want to do. So yes, I mean, that works for some. If you can get there, that's great. Don't get frustrated if you can't. There's still a way forward. So you have to do what you have to do and what suits you. There's something from Nakul which says that, if I've understood it correctly, the challenge seems to be that there's a need for a lot of hustling. Look, maybe. I don't know your situation. I'm sure that is a challenge. I'm sure that is not a challenge that you necessarily look forward to. But I would request that you ask yourself whether you are doing this hustling in order to be transactional. Have you actually found what you really want to do? And no doubt there will be hustling to even do that. But if it is something that you really want to do, maybe you won't see it as hustling.
Yeah, Sriram here. I mean, just a thought. When you have reached a position in corporate, there's always something in bracket for you, and people also look at you along with what you are. But now, when you walk out of the corporate, you shed all those what is there inside the bracket, and then you go out on your own. So I think, like you rightly said, it's important to find out what you are as an individual good at, passionate about, and pursue that without attaching any kind of hey, should I be doing this or should I be doing that because I was doing something different or I was doing something uh, you know which had certain power and which had certain level in your role. So I think that is something that you have shared. I think when you talked about humility, I could relate to that. So I think if we do that, we will be able to do what we are really interested to do as an individual rather than something that came with a position or a role, I would think.
Yeah. No, very true. Very true. it's a very addictive world, the corporate world, and it can mislead you into believing that you are more than you really are. There's a great boost to your ego, when you walk into a plane and somebody says, Mr. So-and-so, welcome aboard, or when you go to a hotel and they recognize you, and all of these things, as we, or a lot of us have been through, I guess. It is very important to remain grounded. I mean, that's all I can say. That is not who you are. You are doing, or you are performing a certain role for an organization. And at some point, that role is going to end while you carry on, and the two need to be distinguished.